Do you want me to talk about Emperor Napoleon since he's the third emperor? Or...
Yeah, might as well. I'll just take over some of the key marshals who we're going to be talking about before we get into the Allied and French plans.
All right. Here, let me bring up the extravagant painting of Napoleon when he is crowned emperor. It's pretty ridiculous as a painting, to be honest. For those who don't know, Napoleon Bonaparte's military career before Austerlitz in 1805 was marked by rapid promotion, strategic brilliance, and key victories that established him as history's one of history's greatest commanders. A lot would argue, probably the greatest. He was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica. He's not French, which always surprises people, I find. Napoleon was trained at a French military academy and he became an artillery officer. His first major success was during the Siege of Toulon, that's in 1793, where he played a crucial role in recapturing the city from the British. This earned him a promotion to brigadier general. He would later suppress the royalist uprising in Paris in 1795 with the famous quote, with just a whiff of grape shot, securing his rise in politics and military circles. In 1796, he took command of the French army in Italy, where he conducted a brilliant campaign against Austria, winning the decisive battles of Lodi, Alcol, and of course, the one we covered, Rivoli. His victories forced Austria to sign the Treaty of Campo Formio, and seeking further glory, he led an Egyptian campaign in 1798 to defeat the Mamluks at the Battle of the Pyramids, but he would suffer a naval disaster at the Battle of the Nile, another episode we have covered. Returning to France, he seized power in the coup of the 18 Brumaire, becoming the first consul, and then he crushed Austria at Marengo and solidified his rule. In 1804, he famously crowned himself as Emperor of the French, and well, like you said, after that, he had built the Grande Armée, and this is going to be bringing us right up to this point.
Sure. Thanks, Craig. Uh, so yeah, I think now that we talked about the emperors and the key Russian general, I'll just take a little some time to just mention a few of the important marshals and his commanders because they play a key role for
Mhm.
his upcoming victory. Uh, is the screen visible?
Yeah, just a second, it takes a while. Yeah, it's invisible.
Yeah. So we now have Marshal Davout, known as the Iron Marshal, renowned for instilling a lot of discipline into his men and a passionate fighter during the Revolutionary Wars. He was, it was quite surprising when he was made a marshal, given that he did not have any experience of beyond that of a brigadier general. But he would be one of those few marshals, I would add, that would be able to handle independent command successfully. Quite a few of Napoleon's marshals could never do that. He was one of the rare few who could. And he would later share a really passionate hatred for a future enemy of France, the King of Sweden, for events that we will cover in a future episode. Then other key marshals is obviously we have Marshal Murat, the commander of the cavalry, famously flamboyant in his looks,
I was going to
has to
say,
look
for
good.
people who can't see the podcast, this picture is outstanding.
Yeah, and he was one of the most senior marshals when Napoleon crowned himself and created the empire, the marshals of the empire. He was the second one, so he did have technically a lot more seniority over the other marshals. Uh, a really brave man. He first meets Napoleon, during the Paris Royalist uprising, and helps him, secure that victory for the Directory, which allows and then continues to serve with Napoleon from there. He plays a key role in his Italian campaigns and his Egypt and Marengo, and sorry, the War of the Second Coalition. And if there's one thing it is, that guy just always dressed up extravagantly. It kind of reminds you a bit of Goring in that sense.
Yeah, he has a bit of a Goring in him. Well, I mean, it's because the choice of his military uniform, it's the coloration is like kind of like what Goring liked. And
True,
yeah.
but undeniably one of the best cavalry commanders and always at the front, but really poor as a strategic commander. Then we had, so just want to talk about Marshal Soult because his unit is going to play a key role. He was a sergeant, drill sergeant in the army of France when the Revolutionary Wars broke out. And even though he was promoted to a lieutenant quite early, and his battalion in the Pyrenees front had a baptism of fire, which saw about 50% of them become casualties. But he was praised. He serves in the staff of General Lefebvre, another fellow marshal of his, he's not present in this battle though. And he proves himself to be an extremely able staff officer and divisional general, brigadier general, sorry, leading Lefebvre's crack brigade. He gets injured in the in 1799, and he has quite an agonizing time in recovery, is freed and returns to France. And he's put in charge of one camp in the planned invasion of England before he's made a marshal. And this man was a drill instructor by nature. And he kept drilling his men so hard that even Napoleon questioned, like, aren't you going a bit too tough on these guys? But it does lead to the best trained corps of the French army. And the men had a nickname for him, Bras de Fer or Iron Arm. And then the last is Marshal Lannes. So he is my favorite marshal, I will add. I won't even deny that. And one of the few guys who could actually command independently. A really aggressive commander by nature and personality. And he'll play a role securing an entire flank. And he also has a lot of enemies. So Marshal Soult, Murat, and Bessières, who are also present in this battle, are some guys he just hates. That he actually felt that Soult insulted him on the eve of battle and demanded to fight a duel with him. So you really are. He was a hothead, like really hot-headed, but he was a very brave soldier who served as a grenadier in the Napoleonic Wars in Italy. And that's where at the battles of Arcole at Lodi, he was supposedly the first guy to wade across the river onto the Austrian battery line. At Arcole, he was actually being dressed up from an injury that he when he hears that the French are retreating in that back and forth battle, he actually leaves the station while not even fully recovered or treated to just lead a fresh counterattack. Nearly dies in Egypt in the siege of Acre, but his men risked their lives to save him, which, if you ask me, that shows what a great commander he is, if your men are willing to do that. So these are the key commanders. Now, as I alluded to earlier in the the podcast, Napoleon has reorganized the army, which is now called La Grande Armée, into the corps system. This is kind of a novelty at this point for European warfare, but it's kind of similar to how the Roman legions would actually operate. So the principle that had been in warfare in Europe since the Middle Ages and until now was the concentration of an army, which is why you would probably have seen Middle Age battles. They really never could look at keeping a force of more than 40,000 men at best. So what he's done is he's created a corps which in essence is a mini army. And that usually on paper is supposed to be about 15 to 40,000 men. And they will have a couple of brigades of cavalry and artillery. So they can conduct a small independent campaign on their own. They are self-sufficient. They can hold out. And not only are they better trained and equipped compared to the rest of Europe in 1805, they are able to move much faster than any other army on the continent at this time. One, is because obviously their training is superior at this point in time, but they can advance across multiple routes. They can take the supplies from scattered villages along the route. They don't have to rely on one giant supply column. And it also gives the benefit that you don't know where is the main thrust coming from. And they can quickly concentrate when needed for battle. And this is going to be a theme that Napoleon keeps using throughout his military career as emperor. And there were, I would say, also like two kind of special corps, if you would. One is the Imperial Guard, which is the crack and the best unit of the army. It contains, some of the most famous, like the Chachals à Cheval, and the best infantry and cavalry units of the army. And they are commanded by Marshal Bessières at this time. And during the Russian campaign, you actually need 3 marshals for the Imperial Guard. It grows such a size. And then you also had the cavalry reserve, which was under Murat. And that is supposed to be about 4 to 5 brigades of cavalry. So that gives him a reserve force of exclusively horsemen that numbers about 20 to 22,000 men. Whereas right now, the Russian and Austrian armies that he's facing is still kind of very outdated in their ways to conduct war. So the Russians are still not even going to get out of this, even after the Napoleonic eras, is officers are very aristocratic. You buy your commissions, which, while it's prevalent at this time, it's pretty much gets phased out starting from the early 19th century. But Russia is going to, continue to have that problem well into, I think, Russo-Japanese War. I think it was still there, right?
Oh yeah, it was very rampant. The Russo-Japanese War. It's a lot of terrible commanders.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they just bought their commissions rather than actually
Yep, many
pass
of
an
them.
exam.
Mm.
Yep. And they never really trained their soldiers. They just kind of like beat the crap out of them. So while hardy folks, they don't have any firing discipline. The Austrian army is kind of in the middle between these two. It's trying to modernize and adapt, with Archduke Charles, who's currently in Italy, trying to institute reforms. And he is the best Austrian commander this time, but he's not popular at court. And which is why his reforms are really slow to even gain support, and he's kind of like just been sidelined. And his position was actually taken over by General Mack, I might add.
Psst. Hey you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself?
Uh-oh, you live in Japan, and your Netflix doesn't have it?